Welcome, everybody. We'll be getting started in just a minute. Welcome, welcome, bright and early on your Friday mornings. All right, so welcome, everyone. My name is Kari. I'm the communication specialist at the Ontario Council for International Cooperation. And we are so pleased to be here with all of you this morning ahead of International Women's Day next week to hear from some incredible leaders from Haiti, Malawi, Peru, and Canada. I want to start us off just with a land acknowledgement to encourage us all to take a moment to reflect on the past, present, future, and future caretakers of this land we're situated on. Land acknowledgements serve as a way to honor and name the Indigenous communities who have and continue to strive for social justice on Turtle Island, what we know along settler colonial lines as Canada. OCIC acknowledges the sacred land in which we operate and where we now reside, Toronto, known today as Toronto. We acknowledge that our office is situated upon the traditional territories of the Huron-Wendat, Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabeg, and most recently, the Mississauga of the Credit First Nations. This territory is covered by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement between the Anishinaabeg and Haudenosaunee allied nations to peaceably share and care for the lands around the Great Lakes. We also recognize the many nations of Indigenous peoples who presently live on this land, and that many of you are joining us from coast to coast and from around the world today. As we think about moving land acknowledgements beyond words to action, I invite all of you to think of this as a framework through which you can engage with this morning's event. How can we use this acknowledgement of the Indigenous communities on whose land we live, work, and play as a way to ensure the lessons we're learning here today can be used outside of this space we're holding together for us to serve more effectively as allies to Indigenous people? So I invite everyone to just take a moment to reflect on what this acknowledgement means to you and how those of us who are allies can continue to support the process of reconciliation in our own lives. I'll give everyone one moment. Thank you so much for holding this space with us. So we look forward to hearing from some very special guest speakers today. Some of you might recognize their voices as they were featured on our Tapestry 2030 podcast and illustration series, a series that's focused on international cooperation and global solidarity and the partnerships that are needed to create gender transformative sustainable development. It's available anywhere you get your podcasts, and we'll post the link in the chat. We do encourage you to use the chat throughout the conversation today. If you have any questions with our speakers, we'll try to get to as many as we can. And for anybody who wants closed captioning, it is available. If you look along the bottom of your Zoom screen, you can look for the More button and just click Live Transcript for that to be enabled. You'll have to enable that on your own device. But now I'd love to get us started. I'm going to hand it over to our fantastic moderator this morning, Safa. Safa is a podcaster and cultural anthropologist who works in research and communications in the international development sector. She is the founder of Rethinking Development podcast in the studio, and she is the person who not only hosted but produced our Tapestry 2030 series. So I'll hand it over to you, Safa.
Thank you, Kari, and also thank you to OCIC because they envisioned Tapestry 2030 and they brought us all together. So thank you so much. And also welcome to everyone. We're all in a bit of a different time zone. For some people it's morning, for some people it's afternoon. So welcome and thank you for joining us for this conversation, this dialogue. Some of you might have already in the audience had a chance to listen to the episodes that we'll kind of be talking about and recapping. But for those who haven't, please make sure to do so afterwards. So today I'm in conversation with three of our guests from the podcast, Elida Jeanty, who's joining us from Haiti, Erla Zuloeta, who's joining us from Peru, and Basimenye Nhlema, who's joining us from Malawi. And I'd just like to go in a round and ask them to just introduce themselves in their own words. And so to start it off, maybe I can begin with Elida. And Elida is in Haiti, and so her colleague Renaud is going to help us with the translation. So Renaud and Elida, could you please introduce yourselves briefly for us?
Hi everyone, my name is Renaud. I am the community coordinator for Region Haiti, and today I'm here as a leader's helper.
Moi, c'est Elida Jeanty. Moi, je travaille pour RCH. Moi, c'est leader communautaire.
My name is Elida Jeanty. I work with RSCH and I'm officer development.
Thank you. Welcome. Oh, sorry. Would you like to add more?
No.
Okay, thank you and welcome. We look forward to hearing more later. And so now I'll introduce or ask Erla to please introduce herself. And Erla is being supported today by Ruth from her partner organization, Heartlinks Lazos de Corazón. So Ruth and Erla, could you please introduce yourself to us?
Erla, usted primero.
Hola, muy buenos días a todas y todos. Soy Erla Hoyos. Traigo el saludo caluroso de mi querido país, de mi querido Perú, para cada uno, cada una de ustedes en este día que estamos conmemorando el Día Internacional de la Mujer.
Good morning. My name is Erla Hoyos. I send you warm greetings from Peru on this day that we are celebrating the International Women's Day.
Thank you, and welcome. And then, of course, we also are joined by Basimenye. I believe you're connected now because earlier she had some connection issues. So Basimenye, I think I see you on the list. Could you please introduce yourself to us?
Thank you so much, Safa. Good day to everyone. My name is Basimenye Nhlema. I work with partners in health in Malawi, in Nhlema, and very glad to be here and for the second time with OCIC. So really blessed to be part of the team today. Thank you so much.
Thank you to all of you. So as a way to kind of start the conversation, maybe I'll just ask you to share a bit about your episode story or the work that you do, your partnership. As I said earlier, some people in the audience might have already listened in, but some people might have not. So maybe we can go in the same order as we started with Renaud and Elida. Maybe you can share a bit about your episode and the story and the content.
Moi, content décembre, côté moi, yo te invité moi de parler de Fédération Femmes Saint-Marc.
I was happy when in December you invited us to be part of the podcast.
Femmes Saint-Marc gagne cette organisation.
The Federation in Saint-Marc, Haiti, has 7 associations.
Qui gagne environ 200 là-dedans.
About 200 members.
Qui sortent dans différentes organisations.
And they are from different communities.
Nous mettons tête nous ensemble.
We just put heads together.
Nous capables coopérer.
And we work together.
Décembre, nous t'ai parlé des projets L'âme véritable.
We told a story about breadfruit flour.
Côté nous gagnons projet L'âme véritable. En pile L'âme véritable cap gaspillé.
And we work to resolve the problem of wasting in the community.
Pour aider mesdames yo, dans moyen nous gain projet pour aider mesdames yo dans moyen économique.
And we can value breadfruit flower to earn money to assist the women in the community. Yeah. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes. So as you heard from Elida, they're working together with Renaud and other partners from Rayjon to establish a breadfruit processing factory. And then, so next we have Erla. Maybe Erla, you could share a bit about your episode and the story you shared.
Sí, yo también quería comentar más bien algunas reflexiones de lo que me ha surgido al participar en este podcast.
I would like to share some reflections that came to me from having participated in this podcast.
Primero me surge un sentimiento de gratitud por la oportunidad que se nos ha dado al Centro Santa Ángela de compartir nuestra historia, porque al hacerlo nos ha permitido reafirmar nuestras convicciones en lo que hacemos, buscando siempre el bien común.
So first of all, I'd like to, first of all, we are very grateful for the opportunity we've been given to at Centro Santa Ángela to share the history, the story of our work, because it reaffirms our conviction.
Además, también creo que participar en esta experiencia fue una oportunidad para hacer un alto en medio de una pandemia, para poder reflexionar alrededor de las preguntas que traía la entrevista para este podcast.
This was also an opportunity to pause in the middle of a pandemic and to reflect on the questions put to us in the podcast.
Y finalmente, participar de este episodio nos ha permitido también reafirmar nuestra relación con lazos de corazón, en quienes reconocemos que es una relación horizontal, un camino en el que vamos tejiendo juntas lazos de amistad y solidaridad.
And finally, this was also an opportunity for us to reaffirm our relationship with Heartlinks, our partner, which is a horizontal relationship in which we both together are weaving new paths and links of solidarity.
Thank you. Thank you. Beautiful. Yes, thank you. So for those who might not know, the shared work that they refer to is running a leadership school, a multi-generational leadership school in José Leonardo.
Para quienes no saben.
No problem, Ruth. And so Basimenye, I'd like to invite you, could you please tell us a bit about your story? Your episode went live yesterday, so I think many people might not have had a chance to listen yet. So could you please share a bit about your episode?
Yes, that is my first reaction. Our episode just went live. So I'm really, really excited. And just to echo my counterparts' sentiments, it was a real pleasure for me to have been featured in one of the OCIC Tapestry 2030 podcast series, together with Ian, my colleague from PIH Canada, and Isata from PIH Sierra Leone. In the podcast, we basically talked about a 5-year project called the No Woman or Girl Left Behind. That's being implemented here in Malawi as well as in Sierra Leone. And this is with support from the Global Affairs Canada. So in these projects, we are basically building on the work that PIH has already been doing in the 2 sites for the many years that we've been in these 2 sites, with a specific focus on improving access to sexual and reproductive health services for adolescent girls and women, strengthening prevention, treatment, and also redress, the redress part for survivors of sexual and gender-based violence. And also really working with the health centers and the health facilities to increase availability of high quality maternal care, both in Kono, in Sierra Leone, as well as in Malawi. So it was a real pleasure to share the work that we are doing with the Canadian audience. And I think such opportunities are always critical, so that you're able to give feedback from the ground to the people that are supporting your work, and basically helping them to have some insights on how their support is contributing to real lives. So I'm yet to get feedback from from the people after they've listened to the podcast. But yeah, very, very grateful for these two opportunities. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So I think, as Erla mentioned earlier, a lot of these episodes were actually recorded at the end of last year, like December. And so since then, the socioeconomic or political situation in all of these countries or in these communities has changed a bit. And although the initial idea behind the podcast was to kind of focus on the COVID-19 pandemic context for some of these countries, COVID-19 is not necessarily the most important or hard-hitting situation right now. So I'd just like to go around again, and maybe you can each give us either an update on how your project is going, what the status is right now, or maybe just some insights on the current context that you're working in. And so maybe we go back to Renaud and Elida in Haiti and begin with you. Could you share a bit either about what's going on right now, or the status of the breadfruit nursery and breadfruit nursery and flower making project status?
Situation politique là vraiment grave. Situation politique là vraiment grave.
The political situation in our country is very bad, where even school cannot function. There are kidnappings, and everyone is afraid now. And also that have a bad negative impact on our health. We cannot think for the moment. We cannot do our economic activities. There are other negative impact on the country, like most of the young just left the country to go to other countries like Dominican Republic, Brazil, Chile. So now we can talk a little bit about our breadfruit project. We have a property for the moment, and we have already built a house there. Now we have many partners we work with, so we can succeed the project. Now we develop many recipes, and we teach them to the women a way when we have the flour, so they can cook it. And
Et puis, nous gagnons, très prochainement, nous allons clôturer le terrain et puis nous sommes capables de faire pépinière là.
Sorry, Renaud, it went on mute.
Sorry. Okay. So this, can you hear me? Yeah. Yeah. So now, after developing the recipes, they're gonna put a fence on the land. They're gonna build or set up a tree nursery to grow breadfruit saplings. And yeah. Also, they're gonna celebrate the Women International Day with breadfruit flour.
Pépinière capable de nous gagner plus que là, côté pour bouger à lui-même capable de travailler plus.
And the tree nursery will give them money so they can grow the project and make it bigger. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for, sharing that. One thing that you might hear for the audience once they listen in is how this is really the project or this idea behind establishing the nursery was really from the Haitian Women's Federation working together. It's really their idea and their vision. And so thank you for sharing that update. And I'd also now like to go to Erla. Erla, could you share a bit about the situation in Peru? In your episode, the audience, if they've tuned in, they'll hear that there was also political crisis in Peru. So maybe you could just share a bit with us about what the current status is and how the leadership school is going.
Bien, estoy segura que las noticias internacionales ya dan una imagen de cómo está mi país. Y hablar de mi querido Perú es hablar de una historia llena de problemas, sí, pero también una historia llena de esperanzas.
I'm sure in the international news, you will receive an image, not very favorable image of Peru, but to speak of my much loved Peru is to see also that this is a country with many problems, but also a country with great hope.
Y tal vez lo que poco se difunde, ¿no?, en las noticias es que hay una historia también de gente con buena voluntad, que entregan su tiempo para avivar la esperanza mucho más en estos tiempos tan duros que estamos viviendo.
And one thing perhaps you don't hear in the news is that there's also a long history of people of goodwill who are committed to keeping that hope alive, especially in these times right now, which are so difficult.
La crisis política y la corrupción son dos grandes problemas que arrastramos de años en el país y que en la pandemia se han agudizado.
The political crisis and corruption are problems that have been around for many, many years in Peru, and during the pandemic have become even more serious.
En estos últimos meses nos ha golpeado duramente una noticia que ustedes deben haber escuchado sobre el escándalo de las vacunas, del privilegio que se ha tenido una parte de los funcionarios políticos para poder hacer uso de estas vacunas.
In the last few months, one of the news that was most hit us the hardest, and you may have heard of, was the scandal in our country around the vaccines for the pandemic, where high-level functionaries in the government, politicians, using their privilege to access those and make use of those vaccines.
Esta crisis que actualmente vivimos, ¿no? En todas sus dimensiones, en la salud, en la política, en la economía de las familias, crisis en la ética, en los valores, realmente es duro. Sin embargo, sentimos como que se nos está llevando a la desesperanza, pero justamente es desde el Centro Santa Ángela, desde la Escuela de Líderes, que son estos momentos en que más bien nos toca actuar de diferente manera, de animar la esperanza.
So this crisis, which has hit us in this crisis in health, in politics, in ethics, in the economy, in our values, we've been hit very hard in all of these areas, and this leads to a feeling of desperation in the country. But it's precisely at a time like this when something like the leadership school is so important, because we understand that we need to act as a leadership school in order to show a different way of doing things, a different way of behaving, and to return hope to the country.
Por eso en el Centro Santa Ángela, a través de la Escuela de Líderes también, intentamos responder de alguna manera creativa con nuestros programas y proyectos, sobre todo para poder renovar nuestro compromiso ciudadano que tenemos y proponer alternativas a los problemas que nos afectan.
So that's why, as a leadership, as Centro Santa Ángela and the leadership school, we try to use creativity to develop programs and projects that will respond to these problems and that will recommit people as citizens in the country, as civil society, to ¿cuál fue la última, Erla? La última parte del compromiso. Desde ahí.
Intentamos renovar compromisos para proponer alternativas, ¿no?, a los problemas que nos afectan.
Yeah. So to recommit people to respond and develop alternatives to the problems that we are now facing.
Esta respuesta que estamos dando a través de la Escuela de Líderes, y con alegría compartimos que estamos justamente una nueva convocatoria en nuestra escuela. Estamos por aperturar la 4ª edición. Este sería el 7º año que estamos continuando. Y estamos justamente en el año de la pandemia. Estamos renovando e innovando la forma como desarrollar. La tarea de construir desarrollo y bienestar para los pueblos es responsabilidad de todas y todos, que no solo es de las autoridades, es también de ciudadanas y ciudadanos conscientes para aportar en el desarrollo de su comunidad.
And what encourages us and keeps us going in the leadership school is understanding that developing our communities, developing our country is everybody's responsibility. It's not just government responsibility, but it is the responsibility of all citizens to engage and participate.
Bueno, y actualmente en nuestro país nos encontramos también en medio de una campaña, de un proceso electoral. Tenemos una responsabilidad para elegir a las nuevas autoridades que gobernarán. Entonces, este escenario y los otros son los que hacen que la Escuela de Líderes tenga también una importancia en su presencia para contribuir a formar ciudadanas y ciudadanos activos, para emitir también un voto responsable y ético.
And right now we are also in the middle of an electoral campaign for presidency in Peru. And so again, it's the responsibility of citizens to elect the new authorities, and the leadership school plays a role in that, in all of these things I've been talking about, the context. The leadership school helps to form citizens that will be active citizens in the country.
Thank you. Thank you. Great. Wonderful. And I think what comes out really from Erla's reflections is this same approach that we had when we started, that everyone, no matter their age, their background, their role in the organization, what their organization is, they're really leading and really active in addressing some of these really pressing development and societal challenges. So thank you, Erla, for that update. And Basimenye, could you please share with us a bit about the context of Malawi and maybe the work that you're doing as a community health director, and what the status is right now?
Yeah, thank you so much. Listening to Ella's reflections, you would think she's speaking about Malawi. And I think the COVID-19 pandemic has actually showed us, or shone a bright light on a pandemic that we've always had, that we've always lived with, which is a pandemic on leadership and weak governance systems, which in a way have really undermined the functions of the public healthcare system, and have also led to rampant mismanagement of the few resources that low-income countries like Malawi has. So it's really touching to hear that the situation and the way the pandemic is being dealt with by the leaders and office bearers, those people that are supposed to be in the front to support the vulnerable people, has really left a lot to be desired. It's a very similar situation here. I think the last time that maybe I spoke on the Tapestry, the first wave for us as a country, but also in Nhlema, was not as hard as the second wave. And so when the second wave came, it was really hard, because this time around we've lost quite a number of people. Countrywide, we are over 1,000 people that we've lost, and as a district, we've lost about 8 people. So really the expectation of the people, everybody knows that our country struggles when it comes to issues of funding and getting, like, really having the resources for these facilities and structures to function properly. But what really becomes disheartening is when there are few resources that have been identified, and then you see that because of the weak governance systems that we have, you see that there's still mismanagement of those few resources. And that's clearly what was the situation, or has been the situation, especially with the second wave. And people have really taken it upon themselves as the citizens to try their best to hold government accountable. There's been a lot of citizen engagement, people asking and demanding answers or justification for why a certain decision was made the way it was made. And so at the moment, we are seeing some renewed momentum from government, which is trying to address particularly the gap of governance and leadership in public institutions, which includes the health sector, by introducing public sector reforms. Now, I mean, public sector reforms, they've been part and parcel of our political journey. And I mean, since 1964, as a nation, we've been having these reforms over and over again, and not, we do get outcomes, but not as tangible. And so even though we are seeing government um, having this renewed impetus to push for reforms, people are still skeptical, and so what we ended up seeing is the public taking lead in mobilizing resources themselves, um, uh, and you know, and this was, for me personally, in my entire life as a Malawian, I've not seen such a drive from the Malawian citizens being united for one cause and really using our own resources to contribute, to mobilize these resources and do the entire supply chain process at citizen level. And so people contributed a lot of money and were able to buy oxygen cylinders, pulse oximeters, drugs, and doing the distribution to every district hospital in the country, which in a way speaks to the frustrations that people are feeling, and those people that are vulnerable really feeling that we need to do so much more, but also getting to a point where you are not just speaking and holding those in public office accountable, but also doing something as a citizen. So really acting in solidarity and contributing to the solution. So this is something that has been one of the key things that the current thing that is featuring highly in public discourse right now, because people are talking about it, and people are saying we need to do more of this. We need to hold our leaders accountable, and we've seen it working in the short term, where some of uh, public uh, office bearers have been suspended, waiting for investigations. And we are hopeful that this is something that is going to push government to do something, and probably will be something that is going to inform how government structures its work and governance. Yeah.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you so much. So definitely that call or that need to hold governments to account in light of mismanagement of funds, in light of a crisis of leadership, as you all brought out, it's kind of a shared characteristic in all the three countries. And related to that, one issue that kind of was a common thread across all the episode, including these three episodes, is the disproportionate impact that this past year, whether through the pandemic and on top of that, the different political crises, has had on women and girls. So maybe now we can take the conversation to that part, in terms of maybe you can each share a bit about how you see some of the challenges that have come up for women and girls in your community, in terms of not only the economic situation, physical, mental health, whatever it may be. So maybe now we can go and take turns again to share about that. Maybe I'll begin again with Renaud and Elida. If you could just share with us a bit. I know earlier Elida mentioned that you have plans for International Women's Day, and I'd love to hear about that too. But maybe just to begin with, in terms of how has it been for women and girls in the past year, in the past month?
COVID-19 là lui-même, il fait gros impact sur la vie femme avec la victime.
So the COVID-19 has a negative impact into lives of women and girls.
Psychologiquement, si on n'est pas capable d'apprendre bien l'école.
Psychologically, the student cannot learn at school because they are under stress.
Yo peur, d'une part de faute alors.
They are afraid. They don't want even sit beside each other.
Question yo pose même si yo mette cache-nez, yo pas capable de bien l'école là. Yo demande est-ce que cache-nez lui-même si la permet coronavirus.
And even they wear a face mask, they don't use to it. They say, oh, I don't breathe well, and maybe will it cause more sickness to myself? The pandemic paralyzed most of our activities. So it ruined our economic activities. So it broke most of our projects. Sometimes we don't find enough goods. Many NGOs left the country, which caused job loss. So now more people are not working. And because of the pandemic, the price of everything goes up and change drastically time to time. Merci.
I think I was on mute, sorry. Thank you, Elida. Thank you for sharing that. Do you want to add anything in terms of the specific burden on women as caretakers, as food providers, as workers?
So as initiative, we organize like education. We taught how to make a face mask. We teach them how to wash hands. We develop some techniques that call spit up. So you can wash your hand without even touching the bucket. We provide many kits to the association and we teach them.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. And so the association referred to is, of course, the Haitian Women's Federation. So maybe now we can go to Erla. Could you please share a bit about the situation in terms of the impact on women and girls in José Leonardo Ortiz?
Sí, yo creo que reflexionar sobre el impacto que tiene el contexto, la pandemia en la vida de las mujeres, justamente en conmemorando esta fecha del Día Internacional de la Mujer, es muy pertinente, es muy necesario hacerlo, ¿no? Y nosotras siempre pensamos que con este Día Internacional de la Mujer, más que celebrar, es conmemorar, ¿no? Y esta conmemoración que estamos haciendo este año es en un contexto muy especial, ¿no? Es en un contexto de pandemia, y la cual nos está confirmando dolorosamente que existen grandes desigualdades para las mujeres.
In speaking about the impact on women, and especially now that we're coming up to commemorate International Women's Day, it's really important to do this. When we think of International Women's Day, we don't think so much of a celebration as a commemoration. And now in this, in the very special context right now of the pandemic, it's very clear the impact that has occurred in relation to women, and it's painful to see.
Y definitivamente uno de los impactos grandes que ha tenido también en la vida de las familias, especialmente las mujeres, es en el impacto económico. La disminución de los ingresos en la familia impacta en la calidad de vida que pueden tener los hijos, especialmente las niñas y adolescentes.
So one of the largest impacts has been an economic impact with fewer, with a fall in incomes for the family. The quality of life has been reduced and affected, especially for young women and girls and children as well.
En nuestro país, digamos, es fuerte una actividad económica que es la informalidad, ¿no? Entonces, el hecho de estar, por la pandemia, estar en cuarentena, estar confinados, eso agudiza la situación porque muchas mujeres no pueden salir a vender, por ejemplo, en el mercado, y eso realmente lo hace más difícil la situación.
And in our country, where the informal economy is a very large part of the household economies, the confinement imposed because of the pandemic, the isolation, has meant that, for example, women can't go out to the market and sell products. So that has had a large impact.
Y esta situación también hemos constatado que impacta en la educación. En el año 2020 hay un dato que nos está dando el Ministerio de Educación, que cerca de 300,000 niños abandonaron los colegios, y siendo las niñas y adolescentes las más afectadas, pues al ya no estudiar y estar junto a las madres, encima se les sobrecarga, ¿no?, de las tareas de cuidado del hogar, ¿no?, y de los niños o los hermanitos más pequeños.
Another area in which the pandemic has had a great impact is in education. Last year, the Ministry of Education said that 300,000 high school students dropped out last year, and most of them were young women and girls. So they stopped their education, and then at home, confined in the households with their moms, they are then overburdened with household work and of caring for the younger children in the house.
La sobrecarga de trabajo para las mujeres es fuerte. En diferentes círculos, grupos que estamos con las mujeres, es lo común que compartimos, ¿no? Hay una sobrecarga de trabajo para la mujer en el hogar, ¿no? Ahora que estamos confinadas, Para los que tienen la oportunidad de trabajar, pues es el trabajo, es el cuidado del hogar, los niños, atender a los familiares por COVID, y sentimos que todavía en muchos hogares las tareas del hogar no están siendo suficientemente compartido con el compañero o con los hijos o las hijas.
This topic, this issue of overwork is something that we hear about in all the groups that we talk to. The women are confined to the house and now have the children there. They're, if they do still have a job or go out to work, they have to do that as well. And they're also caring for people who are sick with COVID in those same houses. And all of this, what we see is that the sharing of household chores and duties and caregiving isn't happening. It's not being shared with the men and it's not being shared with the boys.
Un desafío grande que tenemos las mujeres y que es un impacto que realmente indigna y duele, es el desafío es querer vivir libres de violencia. La violencia es uno de los grandes impactos que realmente nos lleva a cuestionarnos también, porque nos damos cuenta que con la pandemia no se ha detenido los casos de maltrato, de feminicidio o tentativas de feminicidios.
So one of the biggest challenges that we see is this desire, this goal that we have of women living without violence, free of violence, and seeing during the pandemic, it's made us question this again, because with the pandemic, rather than seeing a falling off of violence against women and girls, we see the opposite.
Nos duele mucho ahora saber que hay varias mujeres que ya no están entre nosotras porque han sido violentadas y llevadas hasta la muerte, ¿no? Y eso nos duele y nos indigna. Pero también esta situación quiero decir que también está siendo motivo de lucha para que más mujeres vamos tomando conciencia de este sistema patriarcal en el que vivimos, que oprime, que maltrata y que quita la vida de las mujeres, porque la violencia es un problema de poder, así es que lo reflexionamos nosotros.
So this is a very painful reality. It's painful for us to see, for example, that there are a number of women who are no longer with us. And this is because they've been raped and killed. This is something that causes us a great deal of pain. It's also, it also offends us. But but at the same time, it becomes a motive to continue to struggle. It's a motive to, amongst women, women becoming more aware of this situation, aware of this patriarchal system in which we live, and which mistreats us and which harms us and even kills us. This terrible situation has become also a motive to struggle against it, to fight against it.
Pero también quiero decir que en este contexto internacional de la mujer, así como los impactos son fuertes y negativos, ¿no?, que revelan las desigualdades en que vivimos las mujeres, también creo que en estas fechas es justo reconocer a muchas mujeres, ¿no?, en mi país, en cada uno de sus países, seguramente asumiendo liderazgo, ¿no? Asumiendo liderazgo sobre todo en redes de sororidad, es lo que constatamos también en este tiempo, ¿no? Redes de sororidad, de solidaridad, de apoyo mutuo frente a los efectos de la pandemia. Actualmente vemos mujeres involucradas en acciones solidarias en sus comunidades, apoyando a otras mujeres. Las ollas comunes aquí en el Perú han resurgido actualmente y son ahora un espacio donde están presentes las mujeres, apoyándose también una a otra, buscando el apoyo y buscando sobresalir de esta situación con emprendimientos, ¿no? Para ayudar a sostenerse en esta crisis.
So for International Women's Day, although there are many inequalities that we see and many negative things, it's also important to recognize those women in our country and in all countries who are taking a leadership role, who are demonstrating solidarity, who have formed networks of solidarity amongst each other. In the phase of the pandemic, this has been very noticeable, women working together and being involved in their community, leaning on each other and supporting each other and supporting other people in the community. One of the things in Peru that has reappeared during the pandemic are what's called the common pot. So these are kitchens where people share food. So people cook together and they share food. And this has, across the country, this has reappeared. And again, these are women who are supporting each other and looking for ways to overcome the situation in which they find themselves.
Sí, creo que ahí me quedo porque podríamos seguir hablando de todas las desigualdades son grandes realmente que impactan en la vida de las mujeres, ¿no? Y que seguramente lo sentimos, lo constatamos quienes somos mujeres.
I'll leave it there because if you start talking about the inequalities, you could go on for a really long time. These are things that I'm sure that we all feel as women.
Yes, thank you, Erla. When you were saying that you could go on, I was smiling, but of course it's tragic. It's not any reason to smile. I think it's very significant that Erla was saying that International Women's Day for them is a commemoration and not a celebration, in terms of a commemoration of the lives lost to gender violence and just both the overt and also the slow violence of patriarchy in our societies. And so I'd also like to, of course, hear from Basimenye. Basimenye, could you please share with us a bit about the impact that, just generally, whether it's COVID or patriarchy, the situation for women and girls in Malawi in the context of the last year?
All right, thank you so much, Safa. Where to start is the question. You would think that by 2020, now currently into 2021, we have made a lot of progress. But at the same time, when you reflect back, but also when you look at what the pandemic has really brought out, it's quite disheartening. The revelation that a home is not a safe place for children, I think this is quite devastating. The very fact that our children are not safe with their very own fathers, their very own brothers, their uncles, their priests, is something that is really confusing and highly disturbing, especially for women who have to go out on a daily basis to fetch water, to fetch firewood, to earn a living, to go and till in the field so that the family can be fed, to go to school so that they can get an education and support their families, to go to work and earn a living for the family. And the very structure that is supposed to support a woman is the very structure that a woman has to protect herself and her children from. I think there is something that is really wrong with our society. And this is not, and what the pandemic has done is to reveal that this is not in one country. This is not among a certain group of people or a certain group of cultures. It is everywhere. We have seen this everywhere. And the very fact that we have to go and plead with government to open schools so that our children can be safe in school and not at home, I think this is one of the things that we need to reflect on seriously this year as we reflect on International Women's Day. There's something that just needs to be done. And I think to a large extent, this is an impact evaluation of all the work that has gone into gender equality programs, campaigns that we've had. This is all. We need to do something about our education system. We need to do something, and this is not just the formal education system, but even the informal education system, the way our cultures are wired, the way that we are socialized, the dialogues that we are having. We really need to address this, because otherwise a woman doesn't have the ability to compete and to succeed in a world like this, because you are constantly having to worry. I am here at work, I am here at the market, I am here at a hospital being a caregiver, but my baby is at home and I don't know what is happening to my baby. And this woman cannot compete on the same level, and we expect this woman to succeed. So as we are commemorating, and this is a sad reality that we are commemorating those women who have lost lives, but even those of us who are living, there is something that is just lost in us. Because yes, we are moving. Yes, we are trying our very best to do our best to support our families, our communities, our families. But the woman is lacking the support that she needs to develop, to succeed, and to do better in this world. So for me, this is the biggest reflection that I have on International Women's Day, especially reflecting on the circumstances and situations that have gone by in the past year.
Yes, thank you. I think that's so powerfully said. Absolutely. And so in one way, in terms of working together or supporting one another in wherever we live internationally, in terms of resisting and fighting against the violence of patriarchy, and of course other systems that intersect with it, one thing I'd like us to speak about is each of you today, you know, what are your thoughts in terms of how we can globally better support one another? Of course, the theme or the overarching theme of Tapestry 2030 is partnerships, is working together. And so you are all right now, or for many years, for some of you, you've had partnerships, you work together. Could you maybe just share your thoughts about how can women across countries, across different divides support each other better? How can we better share power, share resources, share time, attention, and just have better relationships of care and support across borders? So maybe I can, again, start with Elida and Renaud. Maybe you can share with us your thoughts in terms of how to create better relationships and better solidarity with women across borders.
Comment nous allons résoudre le problème? Mesdames, il faut c'est pas communication pour les uns dans les autres.
So we're gonna resolve the problem with women by studying education and communication.
Si les gens connaissent ça qui passe la caillou, ou expliquer moi-même, m'expliquer qui ça qui passe la caillou, et nous capable prendre idée nous prendre et puis nous sortir une résolution.
When I learn from what happened in Canada, for example, in other country, and I tell them the other country what happened in Haiti, so we can work on the ideas together and we bring solution together.
Même si tout pays qui fonctionnement par eux, mais pas fonctionner des mêmes gens, mais problème de femmes, c'est problème de toute femme.
It is true that every country has its own functioning, but the fundamental problem of women are common.
Ça t'a bon tout pour nous t'a former mesdames yo, parler plus comment pour économiser yo, pour capable résoudre problème ça.
So that means we have to take initiative of education to organize like workshop. So we change our thought around that topic.
Là nous changer idée comme ça va nous venir plus fort.
So when we share ideas, we learn from each other that make us stronger. Yes.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. Erla, would you like to add your thoughts to that?
Sí, yo creo que es oportuno en esta fecha también hablar de de qué hacer, ¿no? Para generar los cambios realmente, ¿no? Y yo creo que es un desafío grande porque promover cambios a nivel de todo el mundo, como nos damos cuenta, en todos los países hay ejes comunes, problemas comunes. Entonces, el desafío nos lleva a generar cambios profundos, que es cambios de estructuras, ¿no? Yo creo que por ahí es cambio de estructuras, de la manera de hacer política, de políticas económicas, sociales, de la manera de cómo nos relacionamos, hombres y mujeres, ¿no? Y estos cambios pueden sonar de repente muy grandes, inalcanzables, pero tenemos que darlos así, ¿no? Para poder generar estas transformaciones.
Okay, so it's really good to talk about this on International Women's Day, to talk about what we need to do for changes to happen. And as we see, these changes need to happen across the world. For me, this means changing the structures that for change to really take place, for these transformations to happen, we need to address and change the political structures, the economic and social structures, to change how we relate as men and women to each other. I think this is what would lead to more profound transformations.
Desde mi experiencia, de mi evolución también como mujer, yo creo, estoy convencida que un primer paso para caminar hacia estos cambios es tomar conciencia. Tomar conciencia de la desigualdad que existe, de las inequidades, reflejada en la pobreza, mujeres viviendo en la pobreza, en la discriminación por género, en la discriminación por pueblos. Tomar conciencia de que este sistema patriarcal que vivimos es una creencia falsa del dominio, ¿no? El poder que tienen los hombres sobre las mujeres. En eso desperté yo, darme cuenta qué es lo que nos está oprimiendo como mujeres.
For me, in my experience as a woman and my development as a woman, I've come to believe that the first step is to become aware, to become conscious of this problem, of the inequality that exists, that results in poverty for women, that results in discrimination, gender-based discrimination, discrimination of one people against another. And and to understand that this patriarchal system is a false system. It's a system of domination. And so for me, what is important is to become aware of what this system really is.
Y creo que es cuando tomamos conciencia, cuando empezamos, entonces podemos cuestionar, podemos ya no aceptar como normal estas situaciones de sufrimiento que nos hacen creer que las mujeres hemos nacido para sufrir. Solo es tomando conciencia, lo digo de corazón, esa es mi experiencia. Si tomamos conciencia, yo no voy a aceptar como normal el maltrato. Si soy consciente, voy a empezar a cambiar hasta mis relaciones con las mujeres, ¿no? De mirarnos como hermanas, no como rivales, como nos pone a veces la sociedad. Y también cuando tomo conciencia voy a saber que yo tengo dignidad, que yo tengo derechos, tengo derechos a tener las mismas oportunidades de desarrollo que los varones. Tomar conciencia es eso, buscar también juntos, ¿no? Juntas con los varones, buscar una sociedad de igualdad, porque los varones son parte también, que tiene su impacto negativo sobre ellos también este sistema, ¿no? Que oprime.
So once you become aware, once you are conscious of this situation, you begin to question. You begin to not accept the way things are. For example, the idea that women are born to suffer. You question that and say that that suffering shouldn't be a part of the way you're expected to live, and just accept it. So you don't accept mistreatment. You look for other kinds of relationships where, for example, amongst women, that we are sisters, that we are not rivals, as we are often told. By becoming aware, you regain your dignity. You become aware that you have rights, that you have dignity, that you have a right to develop just as men do, personal development. And then together with men as well, because they are also part of society, to look for a new kind of society. And also with men because patriarchy impacts them negatively as well.
Por eso creo que qué importante es que la cooperación internacional, los recursos que existan, ¿no? Los apoyos en todo el mundo, que realmente sí estén presentes en forma transversal. Creo 3 enfoques desde nuestra experiencia que consideramos importantes, habrán otros seguramente, pero creo que desde nuestra experiencia trabajar con los enfoques de desarrollo humano integral, con el enfoque de género y con el enfoque de derechos, estos tres enfoques desde nuestra experiencia nos va a dar, digamos, ciertas potencialidades para lograr los cambios que queremos.
And as far as international cooperation and support internationally for these changes, in our experience, we have found that it's important that all cooperation include three threads that run through it, three axes or focuses. There may be others, but in our experience, these are integrated or holistic human development, gender, and rights. And these three focuses are what we believe will bring out the potential in our societies, in our communities, to make these changes that are needed.
Entonces, para nosotras también cuando trabajamos así, diseñamos, ejecutamos y evaluamos cuántos de los recursos están generando mayor bienestar en la vida de las mujeres, de los varones. Eso es el enfoque de desarrollo para nosotros. Cuánto están generando esos cambios que tengan vida digna, ¿no? Como se merece la gente, con condiciones de vidas humanas, ¿no? Eso por un lado. También el enfoque de género nos ayuda a mirar, ¿no? A diseñar, ejecutar y evaluar cuánto está mejorando la vida de las mujeres, pero también la de los varones, porque finalmente eso es el enfoque de género. Aspiramos a una vida, a una sociedad de iguales, porque nos merecemos una vida plena que no es la que estamos viviendo, ¿no? Entonces, cuando miramos los proyectos, los programas, con estos lentes de género, ¿no? Entonces eso nos ayuda a evaluar mejor, ¿no? Y también, por último, el enfoque de derechos para nosotras también es bien, bien importante, ¿no? Cuánto las personas están tomando conciencia de que el apoyo que reciben también es un derecho y es un deber de buscarlo, ¿no? Cómo están ejerciendo y defendiendo sus derechos. Desde la escuela trabajamos eso, porque desde la escuela también reciben los apoyos, pero para nosotros es bien importante evaluar cuánto están ejerciendo y defendiendo sus derechos ciudadanos, sus derechos de mujeres a participar activamente, ¿no? Y que finalmente no es un favor que se recibe, es un derecho, ¿no? Es justicia, pero igual como dije al inicio, eso implica tomar conciencia también, ¿no? De que la solidaridad económica que hay es por amor, es por justicia, más que simplemente compasión o caridad, ¿no? Realmente son reflexiones muy profundas que hacemos.
So when we talk about applying these three focuses, for example, if we're looking at a project in our organization, we look at the human development. What we mean by that is we look at how these resources are being used. Are they actually generating better lives for the people that are receiving them? That means for the that means lives that are that have dignity. That means lives that are fully human. So, and then when we apply the lens of gender, we look at how the work we are doing, does it improve the lives of women? But also, does it improve the lives of men so that we are equals in everything? And then when we apply the lens of rights, what we're looking at is whether this work we are doing is, whether through this work we are doing, people are aware of their rights, that they defend them and they exercise them, that they understand that the support they're receiving is a right, it's justice. So that means the rights of women, it means the rights of citizens. And so that in coming back to the idea of consciousness and awareness, this to understand that solidarity and support is not about doing favors for someone. It's not charity, it's justice, and it's a right. And so that's why we speak of solidarity, because it contains this concept.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing those great insights. Thank you, Erla. And Basimenye, I'll hand it over to you for your reflections on this issue.
Thank you so much, Safa. It was really interesting listening to Erla again, and I like what she finished with. Solidarity is not charity, but it's justice. So I think that's an amazing reflection right there. For me, I think I'll echo what the first speaker also talked about: education, dialogue, having these discussions where we are able to share our experiences, our challenges, the strategies that have worked for us. And I think it can be quite helpful when you hear from other contexts as well. Say, for instance, in Peru or Haiti, to hear the challenges, the day-to-day challenges that women face, and what are some of the great things that our sisters in those contexts are doing to help themselves out of those situations. So it becomes an issue where you first of all are able to also understand that I also have the capacity to do something about my situation, that I also need to stand together with fellow women who can support me and who can be my accompagneurs in a way, and who can really hold my hand as we as I go through these like really challenging times. So conversations like this, like really meaningful conversations where we are very honest to the challenges that we are facing and how we can address them, and then couple that with investing in women. And here we're talking about long-term investments, because when we are talking about poverty and poverty for a woman, it's a deep challenge, and it's not something that will be addressed by a 3-year intervention. It's something that will be addressed maybe through investment over a decade, you know? So really finding resources that can support women so that they can pull themselves out of the economic situations that they are in, get an education, have businesses that can support them, and have a way that they can deal with the day-to-day mundane things, so that they also have time to think about the higher things and the strategic things, and that way they are also able to compete on a political level, and able to have their voice represented and heard. So yeah, I think there's a lot that that we can do. Also pushing really the agenda of changing the way we think as women, as I think Ella alluded to that. So yeah, that's what I would say.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. And I think just to reiterate what you brought up in terms of long-term accompaniment, long-term relationship building, long-term support in terms of that is the way forward. And also reiterating what was said earlier in terms of solidarity as justice and not as charity. And I think if for the listeners, if you tune into the episodes, what you'll hear is reflections on different models, right? Every organization has their model for social change, for international cooperation, and there's a lot in there to learn from each person's or each organization's model. I do have some other questions, but in the interest of time, I'm going to forego that. And just before we wrap up, I'd like to give the chance to people in the audience to ask any questions that they may have. So if you do have a question, I invite you to type it into the chat box. If there's any question, we can give it a few seconds or a minute or so to see if anyone wants to type in any questions for our speakers in the chat box. And yes, we apologize that the link was changed. We just had technical difficulties. But for those who are here, thank you for joining us. So does anyone have a question they'd like to share? Let's just give it a minute. And if not, then I will take over. But let's give it a minute to see if anyone has any questions. So we have a question from Claire. She asked, what would you like those of us who are here today to share with others about the experiences you have shared? Great question. Thank you, Claire. And Claire is also one of the wonderful participants in our series. And then we have a second question from Suwani. How can we support this project internationally? And a third question, in the face of so many pandemic hurdles, what small successes have you experienced that let you know that for each step back, there are still 2 steps forward made through the efforts of your community project? So we have those questions, and I'll just open it up, like whoever wants to respond to whatever questions, feel free to do so. Maybe one of the questions resonate more with you than the other. So, and I won't call on you. So whoever, Elida, Erla, Basimenye, if there's one of these questions you feel called to answer to, please feel free to unmute yourself and share your thoughts.
So maybe while my colleagues are thinking on what to respond to, I think I'm not sure if that's Papel. My apologies if I'm mispronouncing the name.
It's Paula. Thank you.
Oh, all right. Thank you. You're asking, in the face of so many pandemic hurdles, what more successes have we experienced? And I think for me, I'll go back to the story that I shared earlier on the citizen movement to come in to support and do something about the pandemic. And I think for me, in a way, that speaks, or rather renewed my faith in humanity. Despite the so many challenges that we have, I think there is hope in humanity, and there is hope that despite the societies that we are living in, where so much emphasis is on the individual and acquiring things for oneself, but we've also seen that people do care about humanity and people do care about one another. And I think that is a huge resource that we can capitalize on. We've seen those instances starting from international corporations, where we are seeing some of the corporations, some of the organizations supporting small countries or low-income countries to have access to COVID vaccines. I think my country is one of the countries that has benefited from such a process where everybody is trying to buy the vaccines because they've got all the resources that are at their disposal, and these small countries cannot compete at the same level. But there have been those who have thought about those countries and said, hey, they also need access to vaccines. What is it that we can do to also make sure that they also get vaccines for their populations? So I think there is hope. We just need to redefine and realign our priorities as a people. So I think that's what I can share. Yeah.
Thank you, Basimenye. And I'd also like to just add that thank you to Renaud and Ruth for simultaneously translating for us. It takes a lot of effort and a concentration back and forth. So thank you to them for all their hard work. So if you'd like either of you to, respond to any of the other questions, feel free to do so. I'll just turn it over to.
Yes, Elida want to provide an answer.
Expérience pas moi t'avais partager avec international.
I would like to share my experience with you.
Dans tant longtemps, côté était convoyé seulement petits garçons à l'école.
In the past, in Haiti, they send only boy to school.
Et pas jamais boy petits filles l'école, petits filles étaient qu'on était là à travailler toute la journée.
They didn't send girls to school because they have to stay home and work at home.
C'est dans le contexte ça, femme haïtienne de mettre pour l'école.
And someday, the Asian women just put together with an association of women.
They porter solidarité.
And they start the solidarity. And they ask for the girl to go to school. And they share the idea there is nothing a man can do, a woman cannot do. The first example we had is Elida, one of the former president of Haiti. And we start celebrating the International Women's Day in Haiti. And today, what we would like to ask for the women, there should be like funds of solidarity for women. And that way they will not be depend on men. They can develop their own initiative, economic initiative.
La caillou, femme aller dans politique, femme avocat, femme tout bagaille dans pays.
And because of that initiative, today in Haiti, women can be a lawyer, they can be president, they can be anything they want in our country. And now we even have laws that says all the districts should be administered by women and men, not men only. Merci.
Wow, thank you for sharing those changes. Wonderful. And also highlighting really the importance of funding feminist movements, funding feminist projects, the importance of economic empowerment, economic autonomy. So Erla, would you like to answer one of the questions?
Sí. Bueno, había una pregunta en relación qué puede compartir el público después de este evento, ¿no? Así lo entendí la pregunta. Y yo creo que una respuesta muy básica, pareciera sencilla, es compartir lo que ha oído y lo que ha sentido esta mañana. Lo que nos ha tocado con las diversas experiencias que hemos compartido, las tres hermanas que llevo en mi corazón, a Basimenye y Elida, lo que hemos compartido son experiencias de vida. Y una experiencia de vida es una experiencia sagrada para mí. Y entonces creo que es bien importante eso, compartir lo que nos ha tocado, ¿no? Lo que nos ha tocado, lo que me está ahí moviendo en el corazón, eso significa que ese es el cambio que queremos dar, ¿no? Y empezar a vivirlo nosotras mismas, ¿no?
I would like to answer the question about what can the public take away today and share with others? What would the speakers like us to share with other people when we talk to them about today's event? For me, I would say that I would like you to share what you've heard and what it made you feel. For me, it's been very significant to listen to my sisters here, and I will keep those words with me from Basimenye and Elida. It's important that here today we've been sharing our lived experiences. And for me, lived experiences are sacred. So I would encourage you, when you speak to others, to talk about what has moved you today.
La otra pregunta que entendí es en relación a cómo se puede ofrecer o dar el apoyo internacional. Yo, bueno, en mi opinión, creo que un aspecto clave es que todos los recursos, los apoyos, las iniciativas, los gestos que hay de solidaridad en este pueblo canadiense y en otros, creo que es bien importante que pues, se pueda contribuir al empoderamiento. Un empoderamiento que realmente sea interno, sentido, convencido en mujeres, en niñas, varones con quienes se apoyan, ¿no? Y un empoderamiento que significa que las mujeres o los participantes de los programas y proyectos sientan realmente el empoderamiento personal, social y político. Así es como nosotros también trabajamos estas tres dimensiones del poder, del empoderamiento, ¿no? Personal, social y político. Que los recursos aseguren gente más segura de sí misma, más capaz de defender sus derechos y luego de poder participar activamente en sus organizaciones y en su país.
So another of the questions was about international support. And to me, a key component in any gesture of solidarity or other kinds of support from Canadians or other countries should be aimed always at empowering the people who are receiving that support. So this is, so for the participants, say in a program, that this should be internal feeling of empowerment, a convincing feeling of empowerment in young people, young women, in women, so that the participants feel this themselves. When we talk about empowerment, we talk about it in three levels: personal empowerment, social, and political empowerment. For those are the three ingredients or kinds of empowerment that we see as key, and we think that all projects should seek to further that. Oh, and also so that the participants feel sure of themselves and of their rights, and are active participants.
Sí, bueno, y una tercera pregunta que entendí también en relación a los logros que hayamos podido ver en pandemia. Yo puedo decir que tal vez lo que más me llama la atención y me alegra son las acciones solidarias que ha surgido entre la gente pobre, entre las comunidades, entre los barrios, ¿no? Aún en medio de las carencias, del sufrimiento y el dolor, ha habido realmente gestos de solidaridad entre los pobres, ¿no? Iniciativas. Y ahí resalto un aspecto importante en estas redes de apoyo, el soporte emocional. Como escuela de pandemia, es necesario tener espacio para una resiliencia personal, pero no quedarse en lo personal, sino pasar a una resiliencia comunitaria. Es lo que experimentamos en la escuela. Era necesario dar el soporte a los líderes para que luego ellos, fortalecidos personalmente, regresaran también a sus comunidades y puedan ayudar.
So the third question was about successes, small successes in the middle of the pandemic. For me, those are the actions of solidarity that we've seen by people by poor people for poor people. And this is, that in the middle of their, all the things that they're lacking, in the middle of their suffering and pain, that they are reaching out to others in their community to support them. One of the initiatives that we saw in also in the leadership school was the emotional support. So one of the kinds of support people have demonstrated is the emotional support that they can give each other. And we saw that in the leadership school, that amongst volunteers and also young professionals, that it was important to have a space like that to build resilience, and that this includes personal resilience, but it doesn't remain just at personal resilience. It's resilience that then is spread to the community. So for example, where participants in the leadership school would develop their own, develop emotionally themselves, but then reach out to their community with initiatives that would aid and assist their community during the pandemic.
Sorry, does she want to add more, or should I? No, okay. Thank you, Erla. Thank you so much for sharing your reflections. It makes me want to go to your leadership school and learn more of your lessons and insights. And I think one thing you said was lived experiences are sacred, and that really touched me. And I think, listening to the podcast, you'll hear stories like personal reflections, lived experiences. So if you haven't already listened, I encourage you all to tune into the 8 episodes. This is like the first series, and it's 8 episodes. But before we wrap up, I'd like to invite OCIC's Executive Director, Kim, to speak with us and share a few words, her reflections. So Kim, I hand it over to you.
Thank you so much. Gracias. Merci beaucoup. I just want to thank, this has been very, very rich, very deep experience today. So I want to thank all of you, all of the guests, the listeners, speakers, the partners, and the members of the council that are part of this initiative and this event today, for being in a shared global space, and especially for being very honest and very open and profoundly sharing the impacts of the pandemic on your communities and your lives. And maybe more importantly, that we're getting to this other piece on the ongoing and deepening impact of patriarchy and corruption and gaps of leadership and inequality, misuse of power and privilege, and all of these things. And I have to say that for me, it doesn't matter how many events I've been to and how many years of work in this type of space, but today actually changes me again. And I think that this is something that you've called on us right now to ask us to share what most impacted us. And I'm sure any of us who are here listening are bearing witness to your lived experiences and also resonating with other stories that we know of or our own lived experiences. So I want to honor that and thank each of you for taking this time. I know we've gone a little bit over time, but I'm sure none of us quite want to leave until it's wrapped up. So this event today and this whole Tapestry 2030 podcast and illustration series is it's a project and initiative, but it's not done. So today it's not ending when we hang up. this Zoom call. This is an ongoing relationship between us as citizens, as global citizens, as human beings, as women and men who care about justice, human rights, and dignity, and leaving no one behind. So I hope that we'll all take that in this spirit, that as this council, OCIC, we are extremely committed to amplifying the voices and experiences of partners around the world, and of pushing further to understand what does deep partnership mean, and how do we decolonize these processes, and how do we own them and take forward our own visions for the future that are more equal, that are feminist, that are deeply connected, and that are universal. I think if there's one thing we've learned in Canada around the framing of Agenda 2030 and the SDGs, is that we have a mechanism to leave no one behind. We have a place and language to call for reconciliation and to call for universality, that each of these issues affects each of us, no matter where we live in every part of the world, but they affect some communities much more. And it is our responsibility to come together to find those solutions. So that's our call to action together. And there will be many things for our international guests today. We will share with you some upcoming activities that we have in the coming year. We have symposiums, global citizens forums, institutes, things that we can continue to be together. It's not just a one-off activity. But the most important one that's this month I want to share is that we have been approved for an event that's part of the UN Commission on Status of Women, the side event. And we will be having grassroots speakers from Afghanistan. Sorry, I have my notes here and I'm just Honduras, and I'm sorry, I forgot the third country, but there will be speakers joining us from different countries to be part of this event to share their stories of the impact of the pandemic and how we can mobilize further. That is on Friday, March 19th. So we'll share that information with you. And I think that it's an act of solidarity to join these women as well, that they're coming to us from their context to be at the UN space. It's an important moment for us to keep our solidarity and mobilize together. And so I'll pass back to Safa to have the closing words, but just a deep, heartfelt thanks to each and every single one of you for today, for this moment that we're together, but also for all the moments going forward that we can choose to keep working together.
Thank you, Kim. That was very beautifully said. That really resonates with me. Thank you. I also feel so grateful. Thank you to Kim and the OCIC team for enabling this dialogue to happen and envisioning Tapestry 2030. Thank you to everyone here in terms of our speakers, of course, their partners, our audience, everyone who was participating in the Tapestry 2030 series, all in all. So Monday is International Women's Day. There's a lot of activities coming up, and we didn't have a chance today to share what each of the organizations have planned, but they all have their own events going on. So I encourage you all to go to their website, find them on social media, sign up for their events, get involved with their activities as well. And so yes, the Tapestry 2030, the 8 episodes are out. You can listen to it anytime you like on your preferred podcast player or on the OCIC website. Also, the partners have their episodes on their website. So please don't let this end today. As Kim said, continue the conversations amongst yourselves, get in touch with us, share with us how this event maybe resonated with you or how the episodes resonated with you. And just thank you again to all the speakers and of course, Ruth and Renaud for their amazing simultaneous translation efforts and interpretation. Thank you for helping make this conversation possible. And yeah, International Women's Day, happy International Women's Day to everyone. And I hope that, you continue to have these conversations. Thank you. Oh, and one final thing is we asked the the speakers and their partners, can you please stay on the line for a few minutes, even though the audience will be leaving. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. we're just gonna give it a few minutes for everyone who's not part of the partners to leave. But thank you everyone.
It's possible they may be stepped away from their computer anyway, so I'm not sure if we can put them in a waiting room or we can just go ahead.
I can remove people as well.
Okay. And do you want to stop the recording so we don't have to cut so much at the end?
Yes. Just 1 second.